Secrets from a Coach. Thrive and maximise your potential in the evolving workplace. Your weekly podcast with Debbie Green of Wishfish and Laura Thompson-Staveley of Phenomenal Training.
Debs.
Law, you all right?
Yeah, new year, new me. We're going to start as we mean to go on, aren't we,
We
Debs?
are, definitely, for sure. It's very important and we're on it.
We are on it. Now, that doesn't mean that we get to do lots of copying and pasting.
No.
As always, we like to have variety and freshness because we're all in this kind of new evolving world of work together. And so the second focus in our Start As You Mean to Go On 4-part series is all about employee engagement is a two-way street.
Oh my God, love this.
So we were very excited when we drafted out what we're going to cover on this because it's one of those opportunities, Debs, for us to get maybe a little bit provocative and a little bit controversial.
Yes, but why would we not if we're going to disrupt people's thinking, right? Why can't we start that process?
Exactly. So it kind of was prompted from a conversation that you and I had a while back about how customer service is almost like a two-way thing. So you almost get the customer service in return from, in a retail scenario or in a kind of utility situation. If I'm grumpy, difficult and disrespectful as the customer, I am less likely to get the shining 5-star service. I'll get the professional level of service if it is a professional, well-trained kind of team of people who are able to maintain that composure. But I'm less likely to get over and above someone wanting to bend over backwards to help me in my situation if I've been really difficult to deal with. So it kind of came from this idea of actually you kind of get the customer service in return that kind of matches the type of customer that you have been with someone.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you 100%. And we've all been there, haven't we, Law, where we've gone in somewhere and we've been super polite and smiley. And then what you've got back is some misery who just looks like they really don't want to be there. And is like, oh my God, get a life. If you don't want the job, go and find something else, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you're customer facing, or even if you're working with other people, part of your role is to create a great space where people can thrive, right?
And equally, I've seen it before where someone's been treated dreadfully by a customer and you can see this poor beleaguered person and then, you're then next in line as the customer and you just bring a bit of a smile and a bit of a positive, demeanour or a bit of a kind of, wow, you've had a tough day, some kind of empathy, and it can transform then that service experience because I, as the customer, am 50% of that mix, that relationship that's happening in that moment.
Yeah.
So we thought it might be quite inspiring maybe and a bit of a food for thought about how that might translate into the world of employee engagement.
Yes. Yeah.
Could it be that actually the level of engagement I feel in my role is not all just about how them and the management actively look to engage me, but actually it's a two-way street. If I want to be engaged, I've got some part to play in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it comes back to how you choose to show up, right? So your intent every day is to, if you want to show up like someone who's got a face like a slapped ass, then you can do. But there will be consequences of how you are being and the impact you have on people. Or you can choose to show up in a way where you just are engaging, you're listening, you're speaking, you're visible, you're walking around, you're making phone calls, whatever it might be, because then people will notice you and you notice them. And it's that two-way all the time. And I think that's what's really important because I think everybody has a part to play in what we do, that to engage not just ourselves, but other people. And the more happier we are in our workplace, right, the better the work is and the more engaged people are and the more motivated they are to want to show up and work in a way that actually brings something that taps into their motivation to be there in the first place. So it's a win-win situation if we get it right. But we know, Law, that we've seen so many places and people that just haven't got it right, and the impact that it has, not just on the person that they're dealing with, but maybe the person that person's then dealing with, and then whatever that person's then dealing with. And I know you've got a great story to share with us about just how that works in practice. So share your story, Laura.
So I had this kind of trip down memory lane the other day, and it was, well, actually, I'll tell you what it came from. I was thinking about what I think is going to be a big challenge, actually, for many workplaces in the year ahead, is really thinking about, do we bring everyone physically into the workplace? Can we be as creative and collaborative online when we work virtually, as we can be in a room if we're then all together? And it kind of sort of struck me that we're sort of looking at the wrong part of the experiment, really. I'll be as creative as I feel engaged. So if you've dragged...
Say that again. Again.
I'll be as creative and collaborative as I am engaged.
Oh my God, that's so true, Laura. I love that.
Is that another one for the team?
Yeah, I definitely think that's another one.
We're on to elbows now. We're running out of steam. Because if you've dragged me in as my employer, coming into an office that where barely anyone turns up anyway, or because there might be sort of differences in terms of the days that we're in, and I've been dragged into that office, or feeling like I'm reluctantly having to go in, and maybe feeling a bit resentful, a bit kind of put upon, or feeling like I've been kind of involved in this sort of decision making, then it's less likely that I'm going to be collaborative, creative, willing to kind of eavesdrop in on opportunities, and then creating more kind of conversation or opportunity in that moment. Whereas if I'm online, if hybrid is actually what I want to do, or a bit of a mix, then I'm going to be creative and collaborative wherever I'm at, because it's not the venue that creates the collaborative and the creative opportunity. It's the sentiment, it's the demeanor, it's the energy I've then got to do that. I mean, just think how some of the sessions that we've been involved in, where we've created all sorts of wonderful conversations, not because we're just there in the room, but because there's been that environment that's been created where there's that mutual engagement and people feel engaged. I want to be here. So I do think that before we start getting involved in what does the science show us in terms of creativity and collaboration, whether you're in the room or whether you're dialing in, actually, we could end up down a bit of a rabbit hole. People are as engaged as they kind of, as they are in that moment. And then it's potentially that impacts behaviours more than the actual environment. And the story that got me thinking about this was way back when we got involved in an amazing big airport, and we got involved in some employee engagement culture change stuff. And one of the exercises that we were doing was in the customer's shoes, in the passenger's shoes. So you'd have groups of people who were kind of dressed in sort of normal clothes, and they would then be walking through the airport through the eyes of the customer, through the eyes of the passenger. And it was just an opportunity to kind of see it with fresh eyes, because sometimes the longer you've worked somewhere, the easier it is to forget what it's actually like. And then with some of the teams, we then got them to do an additional little experiment, which we'd had lots of conversation around the impact of a smile and the chain reaction that can happen when one human smiles at another. It is a universal indicator of joy and trust and engagement, so that kind of smile. And so we set then some of the teams the 100 Smile Challenge. So as they walked around the various terminals and the various kind of public spaces, they were then encouraged to smile at 100 different people. And of course, first of all, people are going, oh my God, this is a really weird thing to do. But actually, they would come back absolutely buzzing, because when a human has smiled at another human, even if the smile isn't done immediately, so the smile giver doesn't see it, it will create some kind of impact that happens after. And on those teams that we would then kind of just walk around and have a look, you could see people would sort of, their face would light up and they would smile in response. What then became one of the this kind of happy accidental byproduct is when that passenger then walked through to the security hall, that passenger, who was more likely to now to have a smile on their face because they've been smiled at before, would then enter into that little service experience a little bit happier and a bit more of a positive demeanour, which then means it created a chain reaction in those waiting security teams, who would then say, oh, God, thank goodness, someone's actually smiling at us.
Someone's a nice person.
Someone's a nice person. And then that would then create more of a bit more of a kind of a warm welcome. And you could see this chain event happening. And then the bit that never really got discussed, but it always struck for me, and it's not until all the years down the line that I remember it now, If then one of that security team had an issue and needed to call on their manager for help, if that security team was a little bit more cheerful because the passenger had been cheerful, they would then be asking that manager with a little bit more of a cheerier demeanour, which would create more willingness to drop everything and come and help that person. So not only could you see this chain reaction from a customer service experience, you could also see from a colleague engagement experience that actually if one person approaches the other, regardless of where they are in that food chain, with positive intent, it creates more of a willingness from the other person to then drop everything and help them out. And it really stuck with me, Debs, because you could feel it. Is this an engaged workplace? Are people wanting to be here? And you can see it on people's faces. If they're smiling, they're more likely to be happy. And if you come to me with a problem and I happen to be your manager and you come at that situation over to me with a positive facial expression, it's more likely to create a chain reaction in me to then want to help. And I know it sounds so simple, but it is incredible how
it's really powerful.
And it's also incredible how easy it is to forget your facial expression when your head is going around 10 to the dozen with all of these thoughts.
I think that's just spot on. And it reminds me of the quote we used to use actually on one of the programs, which one of the directors used to always say to his team was, lose yourself. Oh God, what was it now? Lose yourself in the service of others. So it's Gandhi's quote, lose yourself in the service of others. And when he said it, you could see people look at him as if to go, what are you talking about? And it's exactly that. If you can service in others in a way that makes them walk away smiling and happy and just made their day in that moment, the knock-on effect is huge. And it just says that, doesn't it? So just not only those passengers going through security and then coming out the other end, the impact it would then have if they went and then bought a coffee, or they then went into retail, or they then went down onto the actual, I never know what that thing's called that connects the plane to the whatever, that bit. I'm not technical.
The jetty.
That's the one. The jetty. Yeah. I like that.
I was going to say the plane, Debs, the plane. That's what...
that one. I think that's the bit then, because then that will impact on the cabin crew as well, because they've got potentially a happy passenger turning up, which is and it costs nothing. And I think when you hear people talking about, I'm the employee engagement manager, I always say, well, that's great. But how do you really know that people are engaged and that you're getting the best out of it? You can have all the stats in the world, right? But it changes every single day and every single moment. And whilst your stats might say, yeah, we've got high employee engagement, you could walk in at any time and that engagement might be the complete opposite. So I think, as you said, not just to rely on the facts and the data, they're very helpful. Don't get me wrong. So before anybody complains to us about how facts and data aren't important, they really are. However, there's a big however here. You've got to be in it. And I think that's the energy, like you were saying, Law, which is going to create that environment that people go, oh, this is nice. This is a good place to be. And then people will want to come back, right? But I think it starts with both people. And you mentioned about 50-50. Well, I remember coming across this, and I know we were talking about this earlier, about this 51% rule. And I remember doing it years and years ago, and I'm sure it came from somewhere, but I don't know who it is now, but I'll have to have a look. But, when you talk about the 51% rule is so important, because if both the manager and the team member take on 51% of the responsibility, then a successful outcome is more likely, because that extra 2% creates a solid bridge with no crack to slip through. So when we both parties take that ownership for reaching out and engaging, everybody wins. And managers, which is always a good thing, are more likely to retain their talent, and team members are more likely to feel seen, heard, and then also respected. So I think that 51% ownership means making sure that if you're a team member, as you said, it's speaking up, it's letting your manager know how and what you're doing. Don't assume that your manager knows what your activities are or your accomplishments. So, because lots of people are busy with their own stuff, right? So making sure that, recognizing that your manager isn't a mind reader. But for me, that also goes the other way. As managers, you're also not a mind reader. So unless you notice and care and reach out to your people, your teams, whatever it might be, you'll never know what's going on for them in that moment. So I remember when you sort of see, I love it when you walk in, you observe people, and you always see this one person walking around with a clipboard and a piece of paper, and they look very busy and very important. And I love to go up to them and say, what are you doing? Whatever you're doing looks really interesting. And they look at me as if to say, I'm just trying to be busy and not have anybody approach me, which is the exact opposite of what they really, really want, because they're wanting to ask you some questions. But I love it when you see people with a clipboard and a piece of paper. I always think, are you really engaging, or do you need that clipboard just yourself?
Oh, do you know, Dave, you reminded me, there's a classic Seinfeld episode. I love Seinfeld.
Right.
And George has worked out the secret of not taking on more work at work, basically, which is to walk around the office with a really grumpy facial expression.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, because he said if people see you look stressed and grumpy, they just assume you're busy and you're really important, and they kind of leave you alone. And that's all stuck with about how
that's definitely not engagement, is it?
No, not at all. But I'm thinking, so we've seen so much change happen in our workplaces, just even the last kind of couple of years.
Yeah.
But since we've been using screens and social media more, I wonder if that has had an impact on how pleasant and easygoing we are with each other. Because back in 2000, my read of where everyone was at, because we didn't have handheld screens that we were looking at. There might have people that had mobile phones, but they weren't screen-based ones where you were able to see visual stuff. So we were looking out at each other. We were making eye contact with people. We were smiling, because your only way to engage with the world was physically with the people that were around you, because everyone's faces was basically that kind of projector. Now you might have a load of people standing there in a queue in a workplace who are all looking at their phone, and then they look up at one or two people that they have to, and depending on what they've been consuming in that moment on their phone, they might be feeling really grumpy or stressed or tired. So I think there's also an impact on what does that mean to have an engaged workplace if people are actually spending 75% of the time looking at a screen? Whereas 20 years ago, a generation ago, we would have had to have looked at each other and engaged more, which would have created more potentially positive habits.
I think, oh my God, Laura, you're absolutely right. And you, again, I know you mentioned Seinfeld, but I was watching The One Show, as you do. It's such an eclectic program. I love it. And they were talking yesterday, quite sad, actually. They were talking about loneliness. And that's exactly what they were saying yesterday, that people are feeling more lonely than they have ever done before. Because as you quite rightly said, when you sit down and you're on a train, how many people are not on their phones? Very few people. So you can't engage with somebody. Sometimes you see somebody who gets on and you go, and you give them a bit of a smile. But if your face is in your screen, you're not going to notice that person. And if that person is on their own or feeling super lonely, and they want to have that level of engagement with somebody, just a passing look, just to acknowledge that they exist as a human, that's being eroded, they were saying on this, the guy that was talking about it, I can't think what his name was. And I just sat there and went, that's really sad that we don't look up from our screens. And I must admit, that's one thing I do. If I'm on the train, sometimes you see everybody. I look around and everybody's on their phone, head down, not noticing until maybe somebody kicks off on the train. And then suddenly everybody's involved and then taking pictures of it. And then they go back to the screen. But nobody checks in with that person that may have been impacted by what they've just seen or heard or done to them. And I'm really conscious of that, to check in and go, is everything all right? And I just think it doesn't take much. But they were talking about the levels of loneliness are increasing because of our lack of interaction and connection with people, because we're just face down, basically. And that's quite sad, really. And therefore links to what we're saying about engagement. You can't engage if you're not looking at people, right?
You're so right. You are so right. And you can't engage if you don't have any quality time.
Yes.
So if I were to write a book, Debs, at the end of my professional career of being in the world learning and development, the title of that book would be Honour Your One-to-Ones.
Yes.
That is it.
Oh my God, that's it. Simple.
Have one-to-one time, stick to them. Don't let them be the one meeting that is always shelved because where you put your time, where you point your time is where you're attributing value.
Yeah.
And if actually I'm forever putting everything else other than time with my team, it's then that sends the message out. So why should I bother being engaged in my job if no one is bothering to actually have time to find out what it is I'm interested in? And equally, if actually not having one-to-ones is really bothering me, at what point do I, as an adult who's in the world of work paying taxes, need to responsible. I need to shift out of victim mode into agent mode.
Yeah.
And if actually in the year ahead you're thinking, actually it's really doing my head in, I'm not having one-to-one time, I don't know where I'm at, I don't know what my potential is, I want to have some time, then who have you told? Who have you asked? Who have you said? Actually, it's really important to me and my motivation levels and my engagement in my role to have some one-to-one time. Here's my suggestion. How do you make that happen? And anyone can say that, because you're the only person that is in charge of your own engagement. And if you want to be engaged, it's up to you. It's not up to a group over there to engage me, because that almost makes it feels like the colleagues, in that team, the team of the audience, waiting to be engaged by the managers on the stage. But we're all in it together. We're all responsible for the show.
Yeah, I think completely. And that's the bit I think we need to think about how we can get back to that and how we can start to do that. Because, we went to see Panto, didn't we, just before Christmas, which was amazing. But having worked in a couple of shows myself, I know that the show is only as good as the people involved in it. And there is nothing better than that bubble of people that gets created when they put on a show, where you've got the backroom staff, you've got the front of house staff, you've got the performers, you've got the musicians, and they all work together because their ultimate aim is to create a feeling, a vibe of engagement, and that people walk away feeling like they've had a real great experience. And you can only do that in the moment and with everybody working collaboratively, as you were saying, together, which means that people have to understand what is their focus, what are they accountable for. I think they need to have a level of autonomy and trust in what they're doing, so feel empowered in which to be able to do that. And I think, as you were saying, that connection to feel like I do belong and I am included in what goes on. And I know Lynn's, our colleague, always says, do I matter to this team? I think that question on its own is just incredible. Like you said, don't not do your one-to-ones, honor your one-to-ones. But I think there's also this bit around, can you answer that question of, do I matter to this team? And if I don't feel like I do, then wow, you've got to do something different to make that feel like you do feel included. But that's two-way, right? That's you having a conversation with your manager, team leader, supervisor, but it's also the responsibility of the manager, team leader to create the environment that does create success and enable people to want to be there and to put on a show.
Yeah, absolutely, Debs. And in a hybrid workplace, for those people who are working in a hybrid way, you might have to be even more conscious and intentional about how you ensure people know how to get the best out of you, because it might not leak out automatically because you're there having water cooler conversations. So I just think it's a really fascinating topic, and it's such big ticket item at the moment, employee engagement.
It is.
Which is why we were thoroughly delighted when we stumbled across the LinkedIn research.
Yes.
So what would be awesome is to get your kind of take in on that, and where practically I know on workshops people have just leapt on this is that it's a good place to start. So if you are managing a team, whether that's formally or informally, this is a good place to start in terms of just thinking about those kind of pillars. And also we've had some fascinating conversations with those who are managing a younger team of people than they ever have before. If actually you're working with people that have never really had a big proper job before, and you're wanting them to prepare for a career conversation or a one-to-one, if actually people are a bit kind of stuck, I don't know, actually, what do you think I should do? Then getting them to have a look at this information beforehand can also stimulate more productive conversation in that moment, because not everyone has this thinking at the top of their heads, because they might be so busy in their day job they haven't really had a chance to think about engagement. So it can also help prepare people as just a little bit of light prep ahead of a one-to-one conversation. So this research was gathered, I think, by LinkedIn.
So this was their LinkedIn People Science research that obviously did the research, and they've shown that when organisations weave 6 elements into everyday working life, actually it can harness what matters most to people to be able to create engaged people. So there are 6 elements of it. If you're wanting to create that thriving culture where people-centric leaders, I like the word they use, that you have to like people to manage people. I'm a big believer in that. And if you're not, you shouldn't be a manager. Simple.
Because you're doing more harm than good, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely.
If you consider people in the way,
then
for success, then if you consider people are the way to success, then management's going to be a lot more of a pleasurable ride for you,
and it'll be a lot easier for you as well. So the 6 elements they share, which I think are just, as you said, a great way to start. They start off with that purpose. So, do people have meaning and fulfillment in the role that they're doing? Do they feel part of something that's bigger than themselves? So that ability to know that how and what they do has an impact on the people around them and helps drive success for not just their team, but for the wider organization as well. So that connection is really important, which is another one. So the connection is the one of them where it says, as we mentioned, I feel a sense of belonging and inclusion, that I matter. They have one about growth as well, where you can build your competence and your learning and the impact that you have. So you can maximize on your strengths. And I know we speak about this a lot. A lot of people focus on people's weaknesses, what they're not doing as well. But actually, if you focus on people's strengths and how you can maximize them, then that helps them overcome any challenges that they might find as well. And also, I suppose, gives them more opportunity to learn and grow and develop to be even better humans than they were a moment ago. So there's, they're the 3 so far. There's purpose, connection, and growth. The others are clarity. So making sure that I know what success looks like and I know what part I'm playing on that and how I can prioritize what I'm doing, so that I'm focusing on the things that matter, not just the things that are easy. So that's really important. And the ability for getting good feedback about what they're doing well, where they could improve, what they might need more of. So coming back to your one-to-one, don't get rid of a one-to-one, honor it. I think that's where that can come in and help. Empowerment is one of the others. So again, I have the right information and the right access to the people that I know can help and support me. It's okay to make a mistake and take a bit of a risk. And because I know I'm not going to be berated. So therefore, that is empowerment to take that 51% responsibility for a great outcome. And then the last one, which we know is always close to our heart, is the whole well-being, this feeling of wellness, feeling safe in the world, the way I'm working, to feel that mutual respect. I feel respected so that I respect myself and I respect you, so that I plus you plus relationship. And I'm equitably treated as well. I'm not ruled out. I'm not overlooked for anything. And then I've given that flexibility to be able to manage my time, manage what I'm doing, direct my energy and my efforts into the things that matter, to maintain the energy that I need and my health and happiness. So they're the last 3. So clarity, empowerment, and well-being. So out of those 6 people success elements that were put together by LinkedIn People Science Research, I just think that's a great place to start, as you said, Laura.
So right. And you may be part of an organisation who already has some of these kind of pillars mapped out, this in your own language. But there are many organisations that either, haven't got round to that project yet, or they want to refresh it. And it's just a great place to start. And of course, the wealth of data and insight that LinkedIn has.
Oh my God, huge, right?
It's the biggest global database of working adults that there ever has been. So, they've got their fingertips on so much around, what is seen as really kind of hot right now. So I just think that's a really useful place to start in terms of an engagement point of view. But if I'm not feeling like I'm engaged, then I'm part of that traffic, aren't I? So at some point I've got to make sure that I'm not a victim in on this, that actually I see myself as part of an equitable partnership, as you said. There might be one of us who has manager in the title and the other one that doesn't, but as in the words of Marshall McLuhan, there's no passengers on planet Earth, we're all crew.
Love that.
So in a successful, performing, happy, engaged workplace, there's not one person that's responsible for engagement and everyone else sitting there arms crossed going, go on then, engage me. we're all in it together, because whether it's a customer service experience,
Yeah.
you kind of get the customer service you sort of deserve sometimes. And of course,
Yeah.
there are some outliers where people aren't treated right. But on the whole, if you approach a service situation as a customer with a positive intention, you're more likely to get a good response back. If you, as a part of a team, are approaching your colleagues and your manager and the situations that you're in with positive intent, you're more likely to get a positive response back. If I'm walking around grumpy, disrespectful to others, waiting to be engaged, then I'm kind of impacting that workplace as well. So linking back to kind of the story we touched on at the start, it's that chain of events.
Reaction. Yeah, it is.
That chain reaction and engagement, like customer service in an employee environment, is I believe is a two-way street.
Yeah.
You kind of get back the engagement that you as the employee put in.
Yeah, I think
there's
you're right.
not a vacuum.
No, I think you're right. And I think that links really nicely into my call to action, because as you said, everyone is part of that experience that you create, right? So I think one of the things that you can do is listen more than you speak, because then you'll find out so much more. So as you go forward in this week, this month, this year, just be conscious of, actually, I'm going to listen more than I speak, because I might see some ways of supporting, helping, empowering, creating clarity, all of those lovely things that we can do that engage people in what we're doing. And that's in everything, I think.
Oh, love it. And my share the secret would be, so after you've done a bit of a reflection, I think it's also then asking, actually, how engaged am I at the moment? And what am I going to do about that? And who is the person I need to have a conversation with?
Yeah.
So what might that mean in just terms of sharing it and bringing it a bit to life?
Brilliant.
And if actually this has got you thinking in a bit of a different way around employee engagement, rather than what can we do to engage people, actually, this is just reminding us that it's of mutual benefit. So, this might have just got you thinking in a slightly different way. And if you or someone you know is being targeted to engage people or raise engagement levels this year, then maybe this is also just some food for thought, just to balance it out, because people will be as engaged as they want to be.
Yes, absolutely. So you've got to give them a reason to be engaged, right? And that starts with you as an individual. So yeah, we're all human after all.
All human. And aren't we wonderful as a result of that?
Yeah, lovely. Such a great conversation. I know, Laura, we could talk about this one forever, right? But we love this one. So, yeah.
Yeah, love it. So bring on the third in our series, which will be our next episode that will then come up, which as part of our Starting as a Means to Go On focus for this month, our third focus will be all around team empowerment and delegation. And that D word, Debs, I can't tell you how many people ended last year saying they needed more D in their lives. They needed more delegation. So, we'll look at some useful tips and techniques for bringing out the art of delegation in a way that doesn't make it feel like you're dumping stuff on everyone. So I think that'll be a really hot topic. Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well, Laura. So we can definitely start as we mean to go on. I love it. So I'll see you on the next one.
Oh, love it. Have a good week. Love you, darling.
Too. Love you. Bye.